We were forced to work together, but the truth about our past could destroy us both. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps these stories reach more listeners who love slow burn romance, tension, and unforgettable characters. Now settle in, relax, and let the story begin. She knew the moment he walked in that everything she'd buried was about to surface. The room didn't change. The air didn't shift. No one else reacted the way she did. But her body remembered him instantly. The way her spine stiffened. The way her breath stalled halfway into her lungs. The way her heart turned traitorous, pounding harder than it had any right to. He looked older, sharper, less soft around the edges. Gone was the boy who used to smile like the world hadn't taught him better yet. In his place stood a man who carried himself like someone who had learned exactly what disappointment cost. She hated that she noticed. She hated that she still knew the slope of his shoulders, the rhythm of his walk, the quiet confidence in the way he took up space. He hadn't seen her yet. For one fragile second she considered leaving, slipping out before he noticed, letting him exist again as a ghost instead of a wound. Too late. His gaze lifted. Recognition struck them both at the same time. His expression hardened, not with surprise, but with something colder. Disbelief. Then anger. She felt it like a blow. Of all the places. Of all the moments. You, he said, the words stripped of warmth. Her name sat behind her teeth, unsaid. She refused to give it to him. I didn't know you'd be here, she replied, evenly. A lie. She'd known the moment she accepted the job. She just hadn't believed fate would be cruel enough to put them in the same room again. Well, he said flatly, eyes never leaving her face, that makes one of us. The silence between them stretched thick with everything they'd never resolved. People shifted around them, oblivious to the history standing between their bodies like a loaded weapon. You look the same, he added, and she couldn't tell if it was an accusation or a memory. Her jaw tightened. You don't. That earned her a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. Go. Let him hurt. Because he had shattered her once, and she hadn't forgotten how it felt to be left behind without an explanation. I didn't expect you to stay, he said quietly. I didn't expect you to leave, she shot back. There it was. The truth they'd been circling for years. Whatever this was, whatever they were now, it wasn't over. Not even close. And as she held his gaze, something twisted painfully in her chest. She still didn't know who had broken whom first. She didn't get the luxury of avoiding him. By the end of the meeting, it was clear fate or cruelty had other plans. Since you both have prior experience with the project, the coordinator said cheerfully, you'll be working together. The word together landed like a threat. Her stomach tightened. She kept her expression neutral, professional, even as heat crawled up her neck. Across the table, his jaw clenched. I'll manage, he said, tone clipped. She almost laughed. Don't flatter yourself. I'm not the one who asked for this. His gaze flicked to her, sharp. You always did have a way of rewriting history. Her breath caught. People around them shuffled papers, unaware they were sitting in the blast radius of something volatile. Let's be clear, she said, leaning forward just enough for him to hear. We're here to work. Nothing else. Good, he replied coldly. That makes two of us. The lie sat between them. Because the moment he stood, the air changed. The proximity dragged memories up from places she'd sworn were sealed shut. Late nights, soft laughter. The way he used to reach for her without thinking. She hated herself for remembering. They were assigned adjacent desks. Of course they were. Every movement became a reminder, his presence, just close enough to be impossible to ignore, just far enough to pretend indifference. Hours passed in silence so thick it felt intentional. Finally he spoke. You left, he said without looking at her. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. So did you. His chair turned sharply. I waited. The words sliced deeper than she expected. For how long? She asked, forcing calm. A day? A week? Long enough to realize you weren't coming back. She swallowed hard. Because she had waited too. The argument followed them outside. It always had. You don't get to play the abandoned one, she said as they stepped into the evening air. You disappeared. I was dealing with things you never bothered to ask about. Her chest tightened. I asked. You shut me out. He laughed bitterly. You heard what you wanted to hear. The parking lot was nearly empty, shadows stretching long beneath the streetlights. This isn't happening, she said. We're not doing this. Doing what? He challenged. Pretending we don't hate each other. Her voice cracked despite herself. I don't hate you. The silence that followed was devastating. He looked at her then, not guarded, not angry. Wounded. You should, he said quietly. It would make this easier. She had no response for that.
Because the truth, the unbearable, humiliating truth, was that beneath the anger, beneath the blame, something else still lived.
Something unfinished. I don't know what you think you lost, she said finally, but you don't get to act like you were the only one hurt. He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him. You walked away, he said softly, and you never looked back. Her breath hitched. Because she had. Every single day. She just hadn't known how to come back without breaking all over again. They stood there, suspended between past and present, neither willing to be the first to step back. And as she finally turned away, one terrifying thought echoed through her mind. If being enemies still felt this intense, what would happen if they stopped pretending? By the third day, avoiding him stopped being an option. The project deadlines didn't care about their history. The shared workspace didn't offer alternate routes. Every task required coordination, decisions made together, details cross-checked, conversations that couldn't be delegated or delayed. Forced cooperation had a way of stripping people bare. They began with logistics. Short sentences. Neutral tones. Eyes on screens instead of each other. But even that took effort. She noticed things she wished she wouldn't, the way he listened when she spoke, really listened, as if every word mattered. The way his jaw tightened when someone interrupted her mid-sentence. The way he corrected mistakes quietly instead of calling attention to them. It felt intimate in the most unsettling way. You missed a variable, he said softly at one point, sliding a document toward her. She bristled automatically. I didn't. He didn't argue, just waited. She scanned the page. There it was. Her stomach dropped. I'll fix it, she muttered. I know, he replied, already turning back to his screen. No triumph. No satisfaction. That unnerved her more than being wrong. Hours later, exhaustion set in, the kind that dulled anger and loosened defenses. She rubbed her temples, staring at data that refused to make sense. Without comment, he stood, disappeared, then returned moments later and set a cup beside her. Tea. Exactly how she used to take it. She stiffened. I didn't ask for that. No, he said evenly. But you needed it. She should have pushed it away. She didn't. The silence stretched, not hostile this time, but heavy with things unsaid. You still do that, she said finally. Do what? Notice when I'm about to crash. His hand stilled over the keyboard. That never stopped, he said quietly. Her chest tightened. She hated that his voice still knew how to reach her. Hated that familiarity hadn't faded with time the way she'd hoped. Later, when a system error threatened to derail the entire day's work, panic rippled through the room. People raised their voices. Blame started to surface. He didn't hesitate. Give us 5 minutes, he said calmly. We'll fix it. All eyes turned to her. She felt the weight of expectation and something else. Trust. They worked side by side, close enough that she could feel the tension in his posture, the controlled intensity in every movement. No wasted words. No second guessing. When it was done, the room exhaled. Someone clapped him on the shoulder. Someone else thanked her. She stepped back, suddenly aware of how fast her heart was beating. In the quiet that followed, he looked at her not like an enemy, not like a stranger. Like someone who remembered exactly who she was under pressure. You were always good at this, he said. The praise was simple. It hit harder than any accusation. She turned away before he could see the effect it had on her. Because forced cooperation wasn't just making things easier. It was making it harder to pretend they were finished. And the most dangerous realization of all was beginning to take shape. Working together didn't weaken them. It made them better. It happened by accident. She stayed late. Not to avoid him, she was past pretending that worked, but because the day had drained her in a way sleep wouldn't fix.
The office emptied gradually, voices fading, lights dimming section by section.
She didn't notice she wasn't alone until she heard it. A sharp exhale. Not frustration. Pain. She froze, hands still resting on the back of her chair. It came again, controlled, restrained, like someone fighting not to make a sound. She followed it down the hallway, each step quieter than the last. The door to the conference room was half open.
He stood inside, back to her, one hand braced on the table.
His other hand gripped the edge so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His head was bowed, shoulders tense, breath uneven. He wasn't angry. He was unraveling. She had never seen him like this. Not when they were together. Not even when everything had fallen apart. This was private, unfiltered. For a moment, she considered turning away, pretending she hadn't seen anything, letting him keep whatever dignity this solitude afforded him. But the floor creaked beneath her weight. He still didn't turn. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly.
I wasn't. She stopped.
The lie felt wrong now.
I heard something.
The pause. Then he straightened slowly, exhaling through his nose like he was gathering himself piece by piece before facing her. When he turned, his expression was carefully neutral.
Too careful.
"You shouldn't see me like this," he said. The words landed heavier than she expected. "Like what?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. "Tired," he said finally.
Human. Something inside her shifted.
She stepped fully into the room.
You always pretend you're fine.
His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Someone has to. The silence between them felt different here. Thinner. Less hostile. "You don't have to do that with me," she said before she could stop herself. He looked at her then. "Really look?"
And you don't get to decide that, he replied, not unkindly.
She nodded, swallowing. "Fair." They stood there, neither moving closer, neither stepping back. "I thought you left because you didn't care," she said quietly. "Because I was replaceable." His breath hitched. "That's not what happened," he said. "Then what did?" The question hung between them, dangerous and fragile. He shook his head once. "Not tonight." Disappointment flared sharp and immediate.
I figured, she muttered, turning away.
"Wait." The word stopped her. He didn't reach for her, didn't touch her. But his voice dropped, stripped of armor.
I didn't leave because I stopped loving you, he said.
I left because I didn't know how to survive what I was becoming. Her chest tightened painfully. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because I was afraid if I did," he said, "you'd see me the way I see myself. Broken." The honesty stunned her into silence. She didn't know how to respond to that. So she did the only thing she could. She stayed. Not close, not touching, just present. And as they stood there together in the quiet, something dangerous took root. She didn't hate him the way she thought she did. And she was no longer sure she ever had. The next morning she avoided him. Not obviously, not in a way anyone else would notice. Just enough. She arrived earlier than usual, took longer breaks, found reasons to work in different rooms. Every move was calculated, and not out of anger, but out of fear.
Because seeing him unguarded had undone something.
She replayed the moment over and over, the way his voice had lowered, the honesty in his eyes, the quiet devastation of his confession.
I didn't leave because I stopped loving you.
The words lodged in her chest like a splinter. They explained too much, and not enough. When she finally did have to face him, it was across the room, surrounded by other people. Safe. Neutral. Control. He noticed immediately.
He always did.
His gaze followed her movements, sharp and assessing, like he was trying to solve a problem that refused to sit still.
When their eyes met, something flickered there, uncertainty, maybe, or caution.
Could. If she was confused, he didn't get to be calm. They spoke only when necessary, strictly professional. Polite. Too polite.
It felt like overcorrection.
By midday, the tension had shifted again, not sharp, not explosive, but tight and coiled like something waiting to snap.
You're doing it, he said quietly when they found themselves alone near the printers. Doing what? She asked without looking at him.
Pulling away.
She exhaled slowly.
We agreed to work together. That's what I'm doing. That's not what this is. She turned then, frustration flashing hot. You don't get to decide how I handle things. His jaw tightened. I'm not deciding. I'm noticing. The same word she'd accused him of using yesterday. It shouldn't have bothered her. It did.
Last night, she said, lowering her voice, doesn't change anything.
He stood at her face like he was searching for something underneath the words. No, he agreed slowly. It doesn't. The ease of his agreement unsettled her more than disagreement would have. Then we're clear, she said.
Yes, he replied.
But as she walked away, her chest ached with the certainty that they were anything but. Because clarity didn't feel like this. Confusion followed her home. It lingered as she cooked, as she tried to distract herself, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling long after the city outside went quiet. She told herself she was over him. She told herself the past was exactly where it belonged.
But her body remembered what her mind was trying to forget.
The sound of his voice when he wasn't performing strength. The weight of history pressing in from all sides. The dangerous comfort of knowing someone once loved you enough to break. By the time sleep finally claimed her, one thought pulsed steadily beneath everything else.
If she let herself feel this,
she might lose the enemy she'd relied on to keep her safe.
And she wasn't sure who she'd be without him.
She told herself she didn't care. She repeated at the moment she saw him laugh, really laugh for the first time in days.
The sound cut through the room, unfamiliar and sharp, like it belonged to another life.
He was not laughing with her. He was standing near the coffee station, body angled casually towards someone else. A woman from another department. Confident. Easy.
The kind of person who didn't carry history like a bruise.
Her chest tightened before she could stop it. You don't care, she reminded herself.
But her eyes tracked the way he leaned in slightly, the way his shoulders relaxed.
The way his expression softened in a way she hadn't seen directed at anyone else since he'd walked back into her life. Something ugly stirred. She turned back to her screen, fingers hovering uselessly over the keyboard.
Are you okay?
Someone asked nearby. Yes, she said too quickly. Across the room he glanced up and caught her looking.
For a fraction of a second, the ease vanished from his face.
The woman said something that made him smile again. This time the smile didn't reach his eyes. That should have made her feel better. It didn't. The rest of the afternoon crawled. Every time she passed them, every time she heard the woman's voice, the irritation sharpened into something harder to name. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was the sick, disorienting realization that she was no longer the only person who could pull him out of himself. And she hated that it mattered. By the time she was packing up to leave, she'd convinced herself she was being ridiculous. Then she heard him say her name. Not her name. The other woman's, warmly.
The sound landed low in her stomach.
She grabbed her bag and turned too quickly, nearly colliding with him as he stepped into her path.
Leaving already?
He asked.
Yes, she said flatly. His gaze flicked past her, toward where the woman stood laughing with someone else. Something unreadable crossed his face. You seem tense, he said. She let out a humorless laugh.
You want to talk?
He stood at her for a moment, then said quietly, You don't like her. The statement caught her off guard. I don't know her, she snapped. Exactly. Her pulse spiked.
Why do you care?
He hesitated. Just long enough to matter. I don't, he said finally. I was just surprised. By what? By how closely you were watching. He flared hot and immediate.
I wasn't, she lied. He didn't call her on it.
He just looked at her with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. You don't get to feel this, she said suddenly, the words sharper than she intended. Feel what?
He asked.
Whatever this is, she replied. You don't get to move on like nothing happened and expect me to be unaffected. His expression tightened. You think that's what I'm doing?
Can't you?
Silence stretched. Then softly, no. The word lingered between them, heavy and unresolved. She shook her head, stepping around him. "Good night." She didn't wait for his response. Behind her, she felt his gaze follow her all the way to the door. And for the first time since he'd returned, the truth hit her with brutal clarity. She wasn't just confused anymore. She was jealous. And that meant the enemy she'd been fighting wasn't him at all. She tried to avoid him the next day. Tried being a key word. The office made that impossible. Too many shared spaces, too many reasons their paths crossed, too many memories embedded in the air between them. Till she kept her head down, answered only what was necessary, and pretended she didn't feel the weight of his attention every time he entered a room. What she didn't expect was to feel it shift. She noticed it first when she laughed. It was unintentional. Someone said something absurd during a meeting, and the sound escaped her before she could stop it. Real laughter. The kind she hadn't allowed herself around him in years. She felt it before she saw it. His gaze snapped to her. Not casual, not distant. Possessive. The realization sent a strange shiver through her. Then she saw who she was laughing with. A man from her past. Not that past, but close enough. Someone who knew her before the fallout, before bitterness had hardened her edges. Someone familiar enough to lean in when he spoke, to touch her arm when he made a point. She didn't pull away. Across the room she felt him go still. Later she caught him standing by the window, jaw tight, hands clenched loosely at his sides. He didn't look angry, he looked controlled. Like he was holding something down with sheer force of will. The look in his eyes when they met stopped her cold. It was an accusation. It was jealousy. Or
Undeniable.
and for reasons she didn't want to examine, it unsettled her far more than the woman yesterday ever had. She found him in the break room an hour later, staring into a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "Do you always glare like that?" she asked lightly, "or is today special?" He looked up slowly. "Who was he?" he asked. She blinked. "Excuse me." "The guy you were laughing with." Her stomach flipped. "That's none of your business." His jaw flexed. "Funny. You didn't seem to think so yesterday." "So this is payback?" she asked. "You saw me talking to someone and suddenly it matters." "I saw him touch you." Her breath caught. "He's a friend," she said. "One who doesn't carry a decade of resentment." The words landed harder than she intended. His expression darkened. "You think that's what this is?" he asked quietly. "Resentment? What else would you call it?" "Self-preservation," he said. "From you." Silence stretched between them, thick and volatile. She crossed her arms. "You don't get to interrogate me." "I'm not interrogating," he said. "I'm trying to understand why the idea of you with someone else feels wrong." Her heart slammed painfully against her ribs. "That's not your problem anymore." He took a step closer. "Then why does it feel like you're testing me?" he asked. She shook her head. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" His voice dropped. "Because the way you looked back at me after he made you laugh, like you were waiting to see if I noticed, that didn't feel imaginary." She swallowed. She had luck. And they both knew it. "You don't get to want me now," she said, the truth spilling out raw and unguarded. "Not after walking away when it mattered." His eyes searched her face, something fractured moving beneath the surface. "I never stopped wanting you," he said. The words hit harder than any accusation. Her breath stuttered. "Then you should have stayed gone." She turned and left before he could respond, before she could admit the terrifying truth settling into her chest. Seeing him jealous hadn't pushed her away. It had made her feel chosen. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. She didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice. "I never stopped wanting you," low and unguarded, like a confession that had slipped out before he could stop it. By morning, exhaustion made her reckless. That was how she ended up alone with him. It wasn't planned. It never was with them. One minute she was finishing up late, the building nearly empty. The next she heard footsteps behind her and knew exactly who it was before he spoke. "You're still here." She didn't turn around.
So are you.
Silence settled between them, thick and charged. The kind that remembered everything. "I shouldn't have said what I said yesterday," he added. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the desk.
No, you shouldn't have.
Another pause. But you meant it, she said.
He exhaled slowly.
Yes. The honesty knocked the breath from her lungs. She finally turned to face him. He looked tired.
Not just physically, emotionally worn down, like holding himself back had started to cost him something. His gaze moved over her with careful restraint, stopping just short of touching. I saw you with him, he said quietly, and it made me realize something I didn't want to admit.
Her heart thudded painfully. Witches.
That
I don't hate you, he said. I never did. I just didn't know what to do with how much I still felt. Her laugh was soft and bitter. That's convenient.
I know. She stepped closer despite herself.
You don't get to come back into my life and act like you still have a claim.
I'm not acting, he replied. I'm fighting it. The space between them shrank until she could feel his warmth steady and grounding in a way that made her chest ache. Then stopped, she whispered. He didn't move away. Tell me to, he said. Her throat tightened. She should have. Every logical part of her screamed that this was a mistake, that reopening old wounds would only hurt worse this time.
But logic had never survived him.
Why now?
She asked instead.
Why not years ago?
His jaw clenched. Because I was afraid. Of me. Of myself, he admitted.
Of how much I needed you.
Of what I became when I had you.
Her pulse skidded.
That doesn't sound healthy. No, he agreed. But it was honest.
Something in his voice roared, stripped bare, undid her.
She took one more step. Their breaths mingled.
This can't happen, she said, even as her body betrayed her, leaning into the space he occupied.
I know.
Yet his hand lifted, not touching, hovering just inches from her arm like he was asking permission without words.
Say it, he murmured. She swallowed hard.
Say what? Say you don't feel it too.
Her lips parted. No sound came out.
That was answer enough. His hand dropped.
The loss of contact, imagine as it was, felt like a shock.
I can't be the man who destroys you again, he said hoarsely.
Even if it means wanting you from a distance. Her chest burned. You don't get credit for restraint, she snapped.
Not when you're the reason I'm like this.
He met her gaze, eyes dark with something dangerously close to surrender.
Then tell me to leave.
She didn't.
Neither of them moved.
The line between them, drawn so carefully, so deliberately, wavered.
And for the first time since they'd become enemies, it was clear.
They weren't standing on opposite sides anymore.
They were both balanced on the edge.
The rumor didn't start loudly.
It never did.
It moves the way truth does when people aren't ready for its soft whispers. Glances held a second too long, opposing conversation, when one of them entered the room. She noticed it before he did.
The way her name followed her down the hallway.
The way people stopped asking questions and started assuming answers.
By noon, it had reached him. He found her in the stairwell, the only place that still felt untouched by eyes. His expression was tight, controlled in a way that meant something had already gone wrong. Did you tell anyone?
He asked.
The question stung more than it should have.
No, she said immediately.
Did you?
He shook his head.
Then someone saw. Her stomach dropped. Of course they did. Almost didn't count to them.
Standing too close, voices lowered, history etched into body language, none of that needed proof. They filled in the gaps themselves.
They think something's happening, she said quietly. His jaw clenched.
Nothing is happening.
She laughed under her breath.
That's not how it looks.
Silence pressed in heavier than before. This is my fault, he said finally. She looked at him sharply.
Don't. I shouldn't have followed you that night, he continued. I shouldn't have said what I did.
And I shouldn't have let you, she snapped back.
But here we are.
The stairwell felt smaller, the walls closer. She crossed her arms, grounding herself.
They're already choosing sides, she said. You know how this ends.
He did. They both did. He took a step back, just one, but it felt like miles. We need distance, he said.
The words landed like a betrayal.
You don't get to decide that alone, she replied.
I do if it protects you.
Her chest tightened painfully.
That's not protection.
That's abandonment.
His face hardened like he'd braced for the blow.
I won't be the reason they tear you apart, he said.
Not again.
She stared at him, something raw and furious rising up.
So that's it? She asked.
We almost crossed the line, and now you disappear.
I'm still here, he said. No, she whispered. You're already leaving.
He didn't argue.
That was the worst part. The next few days proved her right.
He became distant, professional, careful, unreadable.
Conversations were clipped.
Eye contact avoided.
The tension that once hummed between them turned cold and sharp, like something unfinished and dangerous. And somehow that hurt more than open hostility ever had. She caught herself watching him when he thought no one noticed. The way his shoulders stayed tense. The way his gaze flicked to her, and the way, too quickly, like looking hurt too much. He was hurting too.
But he was choosing it.
One afternoon, she overheard someone say her name again, followed by a suggestion that made her blood run cold.
He always does this, a voice murmured.
Gets close, then backs out when it matters.
She realized then what he'd done.
He hadn't just stepped back. He'd let the blame fall on her.
That night she confronted him.
You let them think I'm the problem, she said, voice shaking despite herself.
His face went pale.
That wasn't. You didn't correct it, she cut in.
You let them rewrite the story.
He looked at her like she'd struck something deep.
I was trying to protect you.
From what?
She demanded. Being wanted.
The words hung between them.
His control cracked.
You think this is easy?
He asked hoarsely.
Watching you pull away because it's safer than wanting you.
You're the one pulling away.
Because if I don't, he said, stepping closer, I won't stop.
Her breath caught.
I don't trust myself with you, he admitted. And that terrifies me.
The honesty hurt worse than the distance. She shook her head slowly. You don't get to decide what I can survive.
He looked at her like he wanted to argue.
Instead, he stepped back again. And this time, she didn't follow. As he walked away, the truth settled in painfully clear. Almost had changed everything.
And choosing distance might cost them more than choosing each other ever would.
She hadn't meant for it to happen.
That was the lie she told herself as she stood there, hands trembling slightly, heart pounding too hard against her ribs.
But the truth was simpler. She was tired.
Tired of being careful.
Tired of swallowing words that burned on the way down.
Tired of letting him decide when she was allowed to hurt. The meeting room was too bright, too full.
Voices overlapped, papers shuffled.
Someone asked a question she didn't hear.
Then someone said his name.
And just like that, everything inside her snapped into focus.
He was sitting across the table from her, composed, distant, wearing the version of himself he'd chosen since stepping back.
Professional. Untouchable. As if the night in the stairwell had never happened.
As if the things he'd said hadn't rearranged something permanent inside her. She watched him speak, watched others nod along, watched the ease with which he slipped into the safer role. And something bitter rose in her throat.
When a question came again directed at her this time, she answered without thinking.
It was his idea, she said. The room stilled. His head turned sharply. She felt his eyes on her, hot and searching.
It was his call, she continued, voice steady despite the storm inside her.
We discussed it extensively. It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the whole truth either. The implication hung there, intimate, charged, dangerous. A few people exchanged looks. She didn't look at him again until the meeting ended. He waited for her outside.
Of course he did.
The hallway was quite empty enough to feel exposed.
What was that? He asked, low and controlled.
She stopped walking.
That, she said calmly, was me telling the truth.
You didn't need to say it like that.
Her laugh was short, humorless. Funny.
You didn't need to let them assume things about me either.
His jaw tightened.
That wasn't fair.
No, she agreed.
But neither was disappearing.
He stepped closer, lowering his voice.
You're playing with fire.
So are you, she shot back.
You just pretend you're not. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. I backed away for a reason, he said.
And I let you, she replied.
That ends now. Something flickered in his eyes, relief, fear, something dangerously close to longing.
You don't understand what you're risking, he murmured.
I do, she said softly, and I'm choosing it anyway.
The words seemed to shake him.
You don't get to do this alone, he said.
I already have, she replied.
Every time you decided distance was safer than honesty.
His composure fractured.
You think I don't want you? He asked, voice tight.
That this hasn't been killing me.
Then stop punishing me for it. The rawness in her voice broke something in him.
He exhaled, slow and unsteady.
If we cross this line, he said, there's no going back. She met his gaze unflinching.
Good.
For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he stepped away. Not in retreat.
In surrender.
We need to talk, he said quietly. Really talk.
Her heart hammered.
When?
She asked.
Tonight, he said.
Somewhere private.
She nodded once.
As he walked off, she realized something that scared her more than the rumors, more than the risk, more than the past ever had.
She had stopped protecting him.
And in doing so, she'd finally made room for the truth. They didn't choose a dramatic place. That was the irony of it. His apartment was quite, almost painfully ordinary. No witnesses. No audience. Just the low hum of the city outside and the weight of years pressing down on the space between them. She stood near the door at first, like she might still leave. He noticed. Sit, he said gently, gesturing toward the couch. She didn't. I don't trust myself to sit, she replied.
A flicker of something crossed his face, understanding maybe. He nodded once and stayed where he was, a careful distance away. This isn't about fixing things, he said.
I need you to know that.
Her arms crossed tighter.
Then why am I here?
Because I can't keep lying, he said, and neither can you. The words settled between them. She looked at him, then really looked.
The controlled edges were gone.
No distance, no detachment. Just a man who looked exhausted from holding himself back. You left, she said quietly.
I know.
You didn't fight, she continued.
You didn't even explain.
I was scared, he admitted.
Of how much you mattered. Of how easily you could ruin me.
Her breath caught.
That doesn't sound like hate. It never was.
Silence.
Heavy, honest. She took a step closer before she realized she was moving.
You don't get to want me only when it's safe, she said.
You don't get to rewrite the past because it hurts less now.
I'm not asking to rewrite anything, he said.
I'm asking to face it.
Her voice trembled despite herself.
Then say it.
He frowned slightly.
Say what?
Say why you left, she whispered. Say why you turned us into enemies. He swallowed.
Because I loved you, he said simply.
And I didn't know how to be the man you deserved. The confession landed hard, sharp, undeniable.
She felt it like a fracture.
You decided that for me, she said.
I know, he replied.
And I was wrong.
Her chest ached, old wounds reopening, not to bleed, but to finally breathe.
I hated you, she admitted.
I built a version of you in my head that made it easier to survive. I let you, he said. Because I thought distance was better than destroying you.
She shook her head.
You don't get to protect me by hurting me. I won't again, he said, stepping closer.
Not if you give me the chance.
They were close now. Too close to pretend this was just words. You don't get guarantees, she warned.
I'm not the girl you left behind. I don't want her, he said.
I want you.
Azura.
Angry, guarded, impossible. Her laugh was shaky. That sounds reckless. It is.
For the first time, neither of them pulled back.
His hand lifted slowly, stopping inches from her arm.
If I touch you, he said quietly, I won't stop unless you ask me to.
Her heart pounded violently.
Don't make promises you can't keep, she said.
I'm not, he replied. I'm asking for consent. She closed the distance. The contact was minimal, just her fingers curling into his shirt, but it felt seismic. I don't want almost, she whispered. Not anymore. His breath hitched. Neither do I. This time, when he touched her, it wasn't tentative. It was certain.
And as the last wall between them finally gave way, she understood something with startling clarity.
Enemies were easy. Distance was easy. This choosing each other with eyes wide open was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. Morning came too fast.
Light spilled through the windows, soft and unkind, illuminating the truth they could no longer pretend away.
She stood near the sink, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched, watching the city wake up as if nothing had shifted.
Everything had shifted.
Behind her, he moved quietly like he was afraid
Sudden noise would undo what they'd chosen.
When he spoke, his voice was low and steady. "You don't have to stay." She turned slowly.
I know, she said.
But I want to. Something eased in his expression, relief mixed with something heavier. Today won't be easy, he warned.
"I'm done choosing easy."
He stepped closer. No hesitation this time. No distance. "They'll notice," he said.
Let them.
The office felt different the moment they walked in together.
Not touching, not hiding either.
Heads turned.
Conversations paused.
Eyes followed them with open curiosity. Now no more whispers, just attention. She felt it in her spine, that old instinct to shrink, to protect herself by pulling away. He noticed. Without looking at her, he said quietly, "I'm here." She breathed out and kept walking. At her desk, someone smiled too politely. Someone else looked away too quickly. The woman from before, the one who'd laughed with him, watched them with something like understanding. She didn't feel threatened anymore. That surprised her. Mid-morning, the question finally came.
So the colleague said lightly, "Are you too?"
She opened her mouth to deflect. He answered first.
Yes.
The word echoed louder than it should have. The room went quiet. Her pulse spiked, but she didn't interrupt him.
"We are," he continued calmly.
"And I understand if that makes things complicated.
"But it's not something I'm hiding."
He glanced at her. "They're not asking permission, just offering presence." She stepped forward.
"I'm not ashamed," she said.
"And I won't be treated like I should be."
Silence followed.
Then someone nodded.
Another returned to their screen.
The world didn't end.
Later, in the quiet of an empty hallway, she exhaled shakily. "You didn't have to do that."
"I did," he said.
For us.
She looked at him, really looked.
"You're choosing me," she said softly. "Every day," he replied. "Even when it costs." Her throat tightened.
That afternoon, the consequences started arriving.
A meeting request. A conversation with management. Carefully worded concerns masked as professionalism. They sat side by side, listened, responded with calm honesty. No apologies for existing. No retreat. When it was over, they walked out together again.
Outside, the air felt colder. Realer.
This could get worse, she said. I know. You might regret this.
He stopped walking. "I regret losing you once," he said. "I won't regret choosing you now." She reached for his hand. This time, she didn't care who saw. And as they stood there, no longer enemies, no longer hiding, it became clear. Defiance wasn't loud. It was steady.
And love, when chosen openly, was the most rebellious act of all.
The meeting wasn't unexpected. That didn't make it easier.
They were called in separately at first, procedural, careful, almost kind in the way institutions are when they are about to ask for something unreasonable. By the time they sat across from each other in the same room, the truth was already hanging in the air.
This was the price. The conversation was framed politely. Words like conflict of interest, perception, long-term implications. No accusations. No raised voices. Just a choice. One of them would have to step away. Not fired. Not punished. Just removed. Resigned. Quietly displaced so the situation could be smoothed over, reputations preserved. She felt the weight of it settle in her chest. Before she could speak, he did. "I'll take it," he said. Her head snapped toward him. "No." He met her gaze, calm but unyielding. "It makes more sense." "That's not how this works," she said sharply. "We decide together."
"I am deciding," he replied.
"I've already taken too much from you."
Her hands curled into fists.
"You don't get to martyr yourself," she said.
"Not again."
"This isn't martyrdom," he said quietly. "It's accountability." She stood abruptly.
"You're choosing the easy way out."
His expression softened, painful and sincere.
"I'm choosing you without asking you to shrink." The room felt too small. Too final.
"If you leave," she said, voice shaking, "this place wins." No, he said gently.
We do.
The decision was made before she could stop it. He packed his office that afternoon. No speeches. No dramatics.
Just quiet goodbyes and a few surprised looks from people who hadn't realized how much he anchored the room.
She watched from the doorway as he took the last box. This time he didn't walk away without looking back. Outside, the city buzzed as usual, uncaring. You don't have to stay with me, he said. Not after this. She stared at him, disbelief giving way to something fierce. You really don't understand me, or if you think that, she replied.
He laughed softly.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Still, the doubt lingered.
Change was frightening. Love didn't erase consequences, it just made them worth facing. That night, as they lay awake side by side, she realized something profound.
Choosing each other hadn't solved everything,
but it had made everything honest. And that was enough to keep going. Time didn't rush to fix things. It moved slowly, intentionally. Weeks passed, then months. He found new work, not immediately, not easily, but work that challenged him in ways the old job never had. Less prestige, more purpose. She stayed. Not because she was afraid to leave, but because she no longer felt like she had to run. They learned each other again without the pressure of stolen moments or unspoken rules.
morning routines,
Quiet arguments. Laughter that came easier now that it wasn't restrained. Some nights were still hard. The past didn't vanish just because they chose differently. But it stopped turning them. One evening, they stood on a balcony overlooking the city, lights blinking on one by one. Do you ever miss it?
she asked.
The way things were. He considered that. I miss who we were, he said. Not how we broke. She nodded. They were quieter now, stronger in ways that didn't demand proving.
Love hadn't saved them.
They had saved themselves by choosing honesty, by choosing growth, by choosing each other without illusions. As the night settled in, she leaned into him, feeling the steady certainty of his presence. Enemies were easier. But this was real. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build.